All right, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we have John Goodman, who is presenting today, and we are really excited to have him. So without further ado, John, if you would like to start us off.
Okay, great. And as a board member of the Northeast chapter, I also had just wanted to draw your attention to on August 7th, there will be a workshop put on by Loeb Leadership on workplace communication. I took it when it was at Nestle's about a month and a half ago. It was really very, very good. So take a look at the summary, and you might want to join that. Um, Today, we're exploring customer rage, and customer bad behavior is not really all that new, but it is increased in prevalence and intensity to the point where the insurance industry is now focusing heavily on how can they better protect their executives after the United Healthcare shooting. And it's just really gotten bad for the employees also. And this isn't just in the United States. In Japan, they have now passed legislation requiring companies to protect their employees from their customers. They call it customer harassment over there, which has
Wow.
gotten to the point where there have been cases of customers forcing employees down on their knees to beg forgiveness. So things have really sort of gotten out of hand in a lot of ways. Uh, Now, in terms of understanding it and then addressing it, I'm not going to be giving you any rocket science today. Most of this is common sense, a lot of which you have known about for a long time. The way I put it is that while it's simple, it's not easy. And so I'm going to be suggesting 12 broad areas where you need to focus, and you need to pick your battles. And as you try getting other functions within your organization to make the changes necessary, because many of them are not in your department, uh, you should pick your battles and only ask them to do one or two things, measure the dickens out of it, show that it has tremendous impact, and then build on that victory. So, what we're going to do, okay, I guess I have to now share my screen. Uh, let's see, where am I? Let's, can you, we actually started slightly differently here. How am I sharing my screen? Or can I share my screen?
You should be able to. Do you see the share at the bottom?
Oh, I don't, which is the interesting thing.
Oh, okay, good.
Looking for view. Let's see. I apologize for this. I thought we had all this figured. Okay, there it is. All right. And
All right, perfect. It's pulling up.
okay. And now all I have to do, all right, is there we go. Okay, what we're going to be talking about today is some background research, the causes of rage, the cost and quantitative impact, just very briefly, because you've gotten that in other workshops that I've done, and then four strategies for managing and preventing rage, and then a very quick evaluation framework, which I'm going to ask you to go through at the end of this. And I Unfortunately, I'm probably going to make you feel bad because you're not going to feel like you've done a bunch of these things. But what I want you to do is pick two or three and focus on those. Very quickly, the RAGE study came out of research that we did at Harvard Business and Law School in 1970. We were a student group called CRAP. Citizen Research Assistance Programs. The Attorney General said the government couldn't hire CRAP, so we then changed it to TARP. We got a project with the White House Office of Consumer Affairs to do the first cross-section survey of the U.S. population to find what do people do when they have problems. That's been replicated 11 times now under the flag of CCMC, my current organization. We've done two Japanese rage studies, found similar behaviors. And we also have done a delight study that showed that the same things that create delight also reduce rage. Transparency, education, empathy, and enthusiasm. We also have found that you can take complaint data and extrapolate it to the marketplace using what we call the multiplier, which means that for each complaint you get, there are 10 out there or 25 for most situations, and that allows you to make a much more powerful business case. Uh, More recently, with five of the CPG companies, several of which are on this call today, we have shown that it's possible to achieve up to 40% delight. And again, by undercutting rage, you actually, in many cases, create delight because of people's very low expectations. And for those B2B people on the phone today, we have found all these same behaviors seem to be replicated in the B2B environment. Now, I'm going to give you the bottom line. You can look at this slide, declare victory, and leave at this point if you want. There are basically four basic strategies. You need to provide the customer with easy access. You need to give them first contact resolution using very empowered representatives. The first contact is not new. Very empowered representatives in many cases is. You have to have very easy escalation, and then ideally, you want to prevent the issue. And one other thing which I think that Courtney had said is feel free to ask questions via the chat as I'm going along. The first six questions we get will get a free book, my book Customer Experience 3.0, the second edition that just came out about a year ago. Now, in terms of the rage research, we've talked about the behaviors. What I find really disturbing was in the United Healthcare shooting, there was tens of thousands of social cheers for the shooter. So the public is not very sympathetic to corporations. And we also found this in our CPG study, where basically they were saying you're making the packages smaller. At the same time, you're raising your prices. And I'm reading that you're making record profits and the stock market is at record levels. I'm getting screwed and big business is doing it to me. What we have also found is that 2/3 of people have experienced rage. And again, think of your own behavior. How often are you wound up when you are talking to someone over the phone or encounter an IVR? 43% of people admitted to yelling. 21% think physical threats are now okay. 9% have seek revenge against a company. And what we're finding is depending on how you measure it, 6 to 10% of people are now going to the government, and 32% are posting on social about their issues. The industries that are most affected by this are computer, auto, financial services, cable TV, and airlines. But CPG has also had their share of rage. And the cause is really twofold. Number one, when you are wound up, the blood drains from your head and you are not thinking clearly. So when you get upset, you turn into a crazy person. And if you've ever had an argument with your spouse and then 10 minutes later, well, why didn't I say thus and such? You weren't thinking clearly, which is why you didn't say thus and such. Also, the other problem is that we find that people assume and don't read. In their defense, you have things like the Apple iPhone that has terms and agreements terms and conditions that are 27 pages long. I actually have scanned most of it, and most of it's innocuous, but there are unpleasant surprises in there. Just like I normally ask SoCappers how many of you have read your homeowner's insurance, and only 1 out of 100 in most cases have read it. There are unpleasant surprises in that also, but the company gets blamed for that. So, what are the specific causes of rage? First, in access, it's finding a human being and long messages and wait times. And this includes your call is being recorded for training purposes, which I would argue that many times people have already heard. Uh, Repetition. At United Airlines, I am a 1K flyer, and I call them very regularly. And every single time I have to listen to my call is going to be recorded, and then I have to listen to the offer of the chat uh, link that I have now turned down at least 30 times, and one would assume that they would have figured that out. Uh, Also, you have IVRs that don't have a menu, and what we find is that if one prints the menu wherever you print the 800 number, you have much less problem with the customer dealing with the IVR. Or your voice recognition says, "What can I do for you?" And then the customer says something that it understands. So we find that "What can I do for you?" is a very dangerous phrase to present customers with. In terms of response-related issues, what we find is that there's either no apology or an artificial apology. An awful lot of call centers are not North American focused, and in other parts of the world, people say, for whatever reason, "I do apologize," but it comes across as uh, artificial, and also if there's a bored tone of voice. There are gotchas where, oh, paragraph 3, page 7 says this. And well, I never read that, but I shouldn't have had to read that. We'll come back, and for each of these, I'm going to suggest a specific remedy, which leads to the poor remedy. In many cases, people say, "Okay, we'll give you your money back, or I'll give you 500 miles, or whatever it is," and the assumption is, "I've solved your problem." Well, what we find is customers don't want a token payment anymore. They need their problem fixed, but also they are very interested in being heard. What we have found is being heard, e.g., that when I tell you there's a problem, you have a channel for reporting that back to quality or continuous improvement. That is almost as important as the remedy and the apology. So again, we'll come back to this in a minute, but being heard is very important. Also, customers want to be treated fairly, and one needs to explain to them how a remedy is, in fact, leading to them being able to be treated fairly. Uh, then, in terms of escalation, there has to be an obvious channel. And by the way, this can either be in a self-service environment or a live rep environment where there has to be an obvious way to escalate. If it's a digital channel, there has to be a way of getting to a human being or getting to management. And I'll give an example in a few minutes. If it is a live rep, the rep should be able to say, "Okay, I hear I'm not satisfying you. Would you like to speak to a specialist?" And I'm talking about a specialist rather than a supervisor, because one of the other points we're going to be making is that your frontline representatives should be empowered to be supervisors. I've heard several organizations recently say that, especially with AI assistance, all the simple stuff is now going to be handled by AI and self-service. So literally every CSR is going to have the empowerment and the training and the smarts to be able to act as a supervisor. Um, Then, in terms of the next cause of rage, it's a long wait or a callback. If someone says, "Okay, I will have a supervisor call you back," you have to be able to give a time frame, and it can't be the next 24 to 48 hours. This, again, I understand the difficulty of this. This is why this is simple but not easy. Uh, Also, in many cases, there is no transfer of the detailed information that has already been collected. And what you're basically left with is the customer is struggling. And it's the struggle that's causing rage. Let me stop there and take a breath. And do we have any questions? And does anybody have any comments? Does this make sense to people? Courtney, any comments? Yeah.
Seeing.
Rachel says it makes sense, 100%.
Okay, great. Okay, if we don't have any complaints yet, we'll continue. Um, the other basic
One
behavior, which
question,
I,
actually, John.
okay, great. Very good.
So from Christina Self, she asked, I'm curious as to what the most recent update was, or is that information from 1970?
Yeah. This is from it was January of 2024, and we have a new study that's been fielded and is back. And very honestly, I am sort of mushing the two data because the Wall Street Journal is going to be doing an article on it at some point, and our management has put an embargo on it. But basically, this is data from the last year and a half. This is really almost becoming post-COVID data. And by the way, I should mention that post-COVID, people's attitudes and expectations have changed very, very dramatically. In our CPG study, what we found was this issue of value and price, value for price paid, and inflation, and that came out of nowhere. Before the COVID hit, we had done a rage study in 2020, and that wasn't even for the CPG environment. The value and price wasn't even on the radar. It now has become the biggest single category of complaints in CPG is the package is smaller and your price is higher. Yes, it's basically this is post-COVID to answer your question. Okay, moving on. The multiplier is the ratio of complaints received to the problem in the marketplace. And as I said, the range, what we find normally is can vary from 1 to 4 to 1 to 50, with most organizations having 1 to 10 to 1 to 25. That means that if you get one complaint, there are 10 people out there or 25 people out there who had that kind of a problem. We are also finding for CPG that two-thirds of people who do complain go to the retailer, who in many cases throws the manufacturer under the bus and says, "Oh yeah, we had a bunch of complaints on that." So in many cases, you're not hearing an awful lot of the complaints that are being articulated, and the outcome is not very good. So a learning from this is that one needs to aggressively solicit complaints. It's better to have more complaints in compared to the problems out there than less, because if they're complaining somewhere else, you're not the one that's satisfying them, and in many cases, that's not to your benefit. Now, why do we care? This is part of a presentation that we'd done for SOCAP. I believe we did this with Clorox about a year ago. And what we basically, the point we want to make here is that if we have 200,000 customers with problems, even if 10% complain to us, which is inordinately high, what we find is we are probably going to save about 11,000 of those uh, 20,000 customers who have complained. But we have 144,000 customers who are silent. I'm sorry, we have 150,000 customers who don't complain, and 144,000 of those are silent, but in fact are not going to repurchase again. So what Consumer Affairs is doing is really not quite rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, but you are not really solving the big problem, which is why focusing on preventing problems and rage is much more important than trying to figure out how to handle it after the fact. They are both very important, though. And what we find is that if you are consumer affairs and you are handling those customers, you are achieving about a 37% ROI. And again, we have a paper that walks you through this, but you are still leaving $43 million on the table. So as consumer affairs, you are retaining, you're winning back $2 million worth of revenue, but you're leaving 43 million on the table. This is why we want to prevent problems, get more people to complain, and if they do complain, we want to satisfy them more effectively. The other thing I'll just very quickly mention is that in our delight study, we find that when people complain and are delighted, 30% more say they are willing to spend more or pay more for the product. And we also find that there are cheap delighters, such as being enthusiastic and empathetic and showing interest and concern. But honesty and transparency are the big things. And the other benefit is that if I delight you, I'm generating so much word of mouth that I'm potentially winning two new customers. And this is the way that the most successful companies, the Chick-fil-A's, the Cheesecake Factories, the Harley Davidsons, the USAAs, they get most of their new customers via word of mouth referral. And so our argument is that your whole service system should be a word of mouth management system. I will now get off that soapbox. So one needs to be sure that you don't have struggle. And what we find is most customers abandon after failing to find what they want on the website. And if they abandon, they're probably going to be 10 to 20% less loyal. If they struggle to try and escalate and have difficulty, that market damage doubles. On the other hand, if they have easy escalation, then they're delighted. And a good example of this, I recently was calling Geico, and I called for a special kind of insurance, and the representative said, "Oh, I'm really not able to handle that. Let me transfer you to a specialist." And I thought, "Oh God, okay, fine." And she basically then transferred me to a different queue, and I was concerned I was going to be cut off. I then was connected within 90 seconds. The person said, "Yes, I have all your data, and I can now address your issue." And so what I thought was going to be a real problem turned out to be a huge delighter. So if easy escalation is possible, it creates a delight and a positive word of mouth. And the cost of escalation in almost every case, and this again is where you need to do the math, the cost of escalation is more than offset by the value of the retained customer, except in maybe the case of chewing gum. But anything that's bigger, pet food, any kind of high ticket CPG, or any other larger ticket item, it's going to be a very positive ROI. And again, we're the people who did the original. It costs 5 times as much to get a new customer as to keep one. And it is absolutely true that it's a lot cheaper to retain the customer. All right. Now, what are the strategies that I'm suggesting at this point? First of all, create easy access, and you need to be accessible within one click of the homepage. And I would use, for example, Dyson has the 800 number right on the product that you're using, the vacuum cleaner. So you have to have the 800 number available, ideally on the homepage, but certainly on the contact us page. And by the way, the contact us page label should be at the top of the website, not on the bottom of the website. Your home page has to have a path to get service and to file a complaint. The minute the customer has to really start looking for the 800 number, you're starting to wind them up already. The 800 number and service has to be available when the customer is using the product. I hate to say it, but if the customer uses your product in the evening or at night, I'm thinking, for instance, of a company that sells baby monitors, you need to be available at night when the customer is using your product. It also has to be in front of the customer just in time. If your system sees someone uh, uh, just holding steady on a website and not moving, if it was a sales environment, you have a pop-up saying, "Is there something we can do to help you?" Why not do the same thing in service? You seem to be having a problem. How can we help you? Secondly, you need to encourage complaints. We can only solve problems we know about. Remember, the reason people don't complain is it's too much trouble and I don't think you're really going to help me and you don't care. It's not going to get resolved. So you need to have phrases such as "we can only solve problems we know about." That needs to be highlighted on your contact us page, in the ideal world, even on the home page. We'll fix it or we'll explain why we can't. We'll do it without a lot of hassle. Uh, then you need to proactively ask if the customer needs help. Whenever there is, again, your operations and IT people know whenever a transaction failed. And that's when they should intervene with a pop-up that says, can we help? And then make it easy to complain. If it's an IVR, provide a menu on the IVR wherever the number is given. I shouldn't have to listen to your obtuse menus. I should be able to know which option I want to push before I ever even dial the number. Uh, Promise help if self-service. In Xfinity does a very interesting thing. They say, okay, in most cases, if we reboot your system, which will take 2 minutes, that solves the problem. Please let us reboot your system, and if it doesn't work, we will then connect you expeditiously to technical support. That's a deal I'm willing to participate in. So promise help if the self-service doesn't work. Uh, Also, and this is a no-brainer, but equip voice recognition and any kind of a chatbot with the ability to recognize the word complaint. In 70% of all chatbots where I enter, it says, how may I help you? And I put in the word complaint. It has no record found. So that's an example of something that is obvious that your systems in many cases are not doing. And then provide a virtual queue over broad hours. Uh, if there is going to be any kind of a queue more than about 90 seconds, you need to tell the customer how long it is going to be because it is not to your benefit to have them abandoned. This is one example, and I think we may have somebody from AARP on the phone today. AARP does a very good job of a lot of this in terms of they have a place where you can type in what you want. And as I type at the top, it drops down keywords to help me select the word that is going to help me communicate most effectively with AARP. This is a very, very well put together system. In addition, they have the top issues asked about. They have the top transactions that are asked about. And at the bottom, they also provide the full range of choices, including the 800 numbers and the hours. So this is sort of a good best practice for most organizations. And by the way, just today, I put in the word complaint in the top line there, and I had 3 results that told me how to complain to different parts of AARP. So again, they're really doing pretty much all of it correctly. Now, in terms of strategy, well, actually, let me stop there on access, because what I've suggested is a number of things that are probably daunting to some of you. Do we have questions or complaints at this point? Courtney?
Yep. So we have Jeannie. She made a really good comment. She said, we tend to get customers who want to speak to someone in corporate. So I'm not sure specialists would satisfy them, but in our case, but interesting to start training them as supervisors with AI entering the space. And Laureen asked, what is a good time frame to respond to a customer slash consumer that has contacted during a time that our office is not open?
Okay. In the ideal world, what I would say let me do the last part first, is that we've seen a number of organizations who have a couple of CSRs with in the old days it would be beepers, but they're basically told that you may get after hours stuff, and if you handle that, you'll get paid for it, etc. And so but you normally would say, okay, we may get to you in 2 hours. Otherwise, the best you can do is at least set expectations that, okay, we are closed from 10 p.m. until 6 a.m. We will reach out and contact you, soon after 6 a.m. Or you can say make an appointment. if you're not 7 by 24. The uh, so I think that probably is how I would go about handling that. And what was the first part of the question again? I've already lost it.
No, you're good. It was Jeannie's comment. She said that they tend to get consumers who want to speak to someone in corporate. So she's not
Yes.
sure if specialists would satisfy them.
Okay. In fact, what we find is most of the world will, if a specialist is portrayed as a expert, we find that in most cases it is. But stay tuned. In about 5 minutes, we're going to be talking about escalation to corporate, and I'm going to give some more examples of that. Uh, okay. In terms of this is probably the most important, one of the two most important slides, in that. Uh, when you're actually responding, the response itself can create rage unless you do these things. One, you have to have a genuine apology, avoid the awkwardness. Number two, you have to project confidence and enthusiasm at Zappos, they have someone who says, "Oh, I love lost shipments. I'm the superhero of lost shipments. Let's get started on this." So showing enthusiasm as opposed to, "Oh, okay, let's see what we can do here." Thanks for taking the time to complain. Also, getting to the issue of rage, if somebody is already wound up by the time they have gotten to a rep, one of our trainers suggests that the average consumer has 7 good yells in them, which means that if I call you 7 obnoxious names, I more than likely will be deflated, and then I'm going to be embarrassed for making a fool of myself. Now, this is very different than most companies say, look, if a customer starts using bad language with you, you are allowed to hang up on them. I don't think that does anybody any good. And if at a number of companies, including Apple, we actually implemented this, and you could actually watch reps when they're being screamed at, hold up their fingers and say, okay, you've called me 3 names. You've called me 4 names. I wonder if you can get to 7. And it depersonalizes it. They realize that it's the customer who's losing it. It has nothing to do with them. And then they are able to handle that customer after the fact. And in fact, in most cases, customers end up apologizing. So we basically find that it makes sense to train people how to deal with really irate customers without telling them, oh yeah, just go ahead and hang up. Uh, the third is provide a remedy based on the empowerment and flexible solution spaces. If you can identify the 5 to 7 most standard difficult situations that reps are going to run into and come up with what we call a flexible solution space. There are 3 to 5 ways of handling this depending on the circumstances. Here's what we would do in these 5 different, slightly different circumstances. Use your best judgment. And at that point, you basically tell the rep, do whatever you think is best given that guidance. And what we find is that at that point, representatives can use that guidance on those 5 to 7 issues as a, a way to interpolate or extrapolate to solving everything else. And so if you can empower your representatives on the top difficult, fairly prevalent issues, you then don't need to train them on the next 40 things. They can figure it out on their own. And the big challenge we find is supervisors are scared to death of this kind of an approach because I'm no longer judging you on are you following the script. I am now supposed to be encouraging your risk taking and your flexibility. And evaluating flexibility is a lot harder than evaluating did you color inside the lines, because now I've given you permission to color outside the lines depending on the circumstances. So, and also the ability to override gotchas. And one of the things that we've found is that there are reasonable rules that consumers may have to follow. But if they said, well, I didn't know that was the case, representatives should be able to override the first time. My example, and this is a true story, is the Swift Meat Company approach. They have a rule of one turkey per turkey, one per turkey per consumer. If you call up and you say that that our turkey ruined your Thanksgiving or your dinner, we believe you regardless, and we refund you for your turkey. If you call a second time, now we're going to have a bunch more questions. So it's basically everybody gets one freebie. And assuming you've got decent record keeping, you basically allow the reps to override any of the limitations once. Second time, you're going to have more questions. Okay, on the next issue, if the answer is no, you have to be able to provide a clear, believable explanation that your mother would accept as to why that's the answer and why that policy is the way it is, so that you leave the customer feeling that they have been treated fairly. I recently called a supermarket chain trying to get the district manager, and I was told, oh, we don't give that kind of information out. And I said, why don't you give that kind of information out? This is a district manager over the store where I had this problem. That's our policy. Why do you have that policy? I'm sorry, sir, that is just our policy. And if you go to my supervisor, you will be told the same thing. That is not an acceptable solution. And by the way, the woman then said, yeah, I agree that I should be able to explain it to you, but I can't. I've just been told that's our policy. So you have to empower your representatives with here's the clear, believable explanation and allow them to say, well, that doesn't really make sense, or I don't think that's going to fly. And then you have to either go back and revise the policy or come up with a better explanation for it. Whenever you're doing response guidance, in addition to telling people, here's the answer and here's how you implement it, you have to provide the explanation of what's the rationale, how do you explain this to the customer. I would say less than 20% of companies have gone that far on, and it doesn't need to be on everything, but it has to be on the top 5 to 7 difficult issues so that you understand and you're forcing your legal people or whomever to come up with an explanation that makes some modicum of sense. Or you are, every time you say, I'm sorry, it's policy, you are going to precipitate rage. You then assure the customer that they will be heard. At Toyota, when somebody calls up and says, I had a problem, the front line mentions that this data is going to be passed back to continuous improvement and the root cause analyst. I believe we have Blount Foods on today. They have a very good system for communicating that back to manufacturing quality and product management. So assuring the customer that that channel exists to QA and continuous improvement is tremendously important. And as I said, it's almost as important as the basic remedy that you're providing the customer. And it doesn't cost you anything for the rep to be able to say that, assuming it really exists. And then finally, you need to provide education to the customer on how to avoid future issues. And for instance, it might be in the internet setting, I could say, okay, are you a gamer? Are you a streamer? Are you a small business? And then depending on which of those you are, I will give you the 2 or 3 golden nuggets that are going to help you be successful using this product. And education like this even really applies in fairly simple CPG environments. We worked with a yogurt company that had cherry yogurt, and they had a label on the side that said, caution, real cherries have pits. Translation, be careful to look for pits. They took that label off because marketing said that's silly. The number of broken teeth complaints doubled. Put it back on, went back down. So in fact, simple labels like that really work very, very well. Okay, so for creating the empowerment, to summarize what I had already said, focus on the top 4 to 7 issues. You can't have blanket empowerment. If I tell you you're empowered to solve things, what have I really told you? What do I do in this situation? What do I do in that? So it has to be granular empowerment. And that's where the flexible solution spaces come in. And each CSR should have supervisor empowerment. The supervisors have to focus on how those issues are handled and encourage the use of the empowerment through recognition and what I call victory sessions, which is once every 2 weeks you go around the team and each person talks about the toughest situation they successfully handled in the last 2 weeks. And four things happen all at once. Number one, you get peer recognition for a job well done. Two, I get new word tracks to explain how this is done. Three, you validate the empowerment. Well, I did this for this customer. Oh, I didn't know we were really allowed to do that. And then fourth, the next time you get a really difficult customer, you think, wow, this would be a great opportunity to talk about this customer next Thursday if I can successfully handle them. So it creates the incentive to go the extra mile. Escalated issues, if whenever they're escalated, the rep should put down, why is this being escalated? Is it that I don't have the authority, I don't have the training, or the customer's crazy and they just want to talk to someone else? Uh, there has to be a rationale for the remedy, as I said, the clear, believable explanation, and those clear, believable explanations and the flexible solution spaces are the foundation for creating AI. Because if you have AI run off and start giving answers without the flexible solution space and the clear, believable explanation, you're going to have a disaster. So our argument is that companies that have the flexible solution spaces and the rationales are now in a position to be able to empower their chatbot the same way that they're empowering their CSRs. Okay, let me stop and take a breath there. Any other questions or comments?
Oh my gosh, my audio. I'm sorry. Yes, we have three really great questions that came in. So the first one from Kelsey said, "Do you believe if a company has a chatbot that they have a better chance of actually getting sorry, I lost my thought. Getting the complaint and resolving the issue? Do most companies these days, B2B, tend to have chatbots?"
Yeah, and the reason is really sort of weird, but I've decided it's correct, is that chatbots uh, have a much more rapid response time and create a written record as opposed to the telephone, where I may be sitting in queue and if I'm waiting for a callback, or from email, which email in many cases there isn't a very rigorous standard for when email gets returned. So chatbots seem to have a much more rapid response, and the world is now gravitated to the point where if and AARP may want to comment on this, they have just about eliminated email by pushing people to the chatbot, and it's much more efficient to handle because also when you're doing a chat, you're not writing paragraphs like you are in email where you just sort of blather on. Uh, Next question.
All right. This one is from Michelle. She asked, when using the promise to pass along technique that Xfinity uses, is this method best used via IVR/bot, agent, or both? I expect hiccups where the promised tech support after reboot, for example, isn't viable because, say, the customer is actually past due or something. I expect an agent making the promise is less efficient, but leave fewer mistakes.
Yeah, the answer is yes. In fact, my situation that I ran into was I was dealing with an IVR that then passed me on. Yes, there is an interesting issue about if the customer is past due, but in that would be a place where I would, if the customer is having a problem, hitting them with, by the way, you're past due is not going to really make them happy. My advice in that situation is that's where the CSR could override just like one of the marketing requirements, and say, okay, you're past due, and we need to talk about that, but I'm going to pass you to technical support right now. I would empower the reps to go, and again, you'll get a flack from finance on that, but you're going to wind the customer up if you say, well, you pay your bill, and then I'll let you watch the rest of the football game. That's not going to work real well.
Fair
Next
enough.
question.
All right. This one is from Roberta. In terms of multiple options for resolution for consumers, is that perceived more as a positive or negative thing? For example, we can provide either a free replacement coupon or a refund and let the customer choose which works best for them.
Customers love options. It gives them a feeling of control. So now you don't want 23 options. Three options is probably good enough. But yeah, we find that providing people with options, and it may be, for instance, in an airline environment, I may, it could be serious money you're talking about, but if it's a valuable customer, hey, I can give you a refund, we can get you a hotel, and so you could be doing some fairly expensive things. But again, the theory is that you're empowering the representative to use what they think is their best judgment. So. Okay, let's move on. We have about six more slides. Oops, let me. Okay, in terms of facilitating escalation, uh, the basic thing here is you first need to provide an obvious path. And if this is not a digital environment, there has to be a button to escalate. I want to talk to a human being or talk to management, and I'll give you an example of that in a minute. Um, if the CSR is on the phone, that's where they would say, it sounds like you're not buying what I'm selling. Uh, Let me connect you to a specialist. The second is that you need to have a message that says we really do want to solve your problem. Don't abandon, but please, let us know that you're still unhappy. And that's where did we solve your problem? A good example of where this is not done in most companies is search. In most cases, if I do a search and it comes back no results found or no articles found, it then doesn't say, gee, sorry, we didn't give you anything. Would you like to speak to a human being? That would be an example. Most of the world does not track what happens when somebody does a search on their website. And then the third is making it easy to escalate in terms of clicking to communicate with the office of the president or the management team. And one very specific example of this, there is a Canadian company that has been a leader forever, TELUS, the telephone company in Vancouver, I think they are. And they, on their Contact Us page at the bottom, says, what if I've tried these options and I still need help? At TELUS, our longstanding commitment is putting customers first fuels every aspect of our business. We welcome an opportunity to improve our products and services. Please submit a complaint to TELUS management team, and here is the form to do that. They offer to provide complaints directly to senior management. This is equivalent to Lou Gerstner, the former chairman of American Express, who in a newsletter gave his email address, his real email address. Now, did Lou answer every one of those? No, he had an office of the president, but providing people with an office of the president works dramatically better than just stonewalling them. So again, facilitate escalation. And in fact, one of the things you should be measuring is ease of escalation. How many people escalate, and how easy is it for them to escalate their complaint, whether it's to a human being or to management? And then finally, the fourth strategy is to prevent problems that beget rage. This is the most intelligent approach. And what we find is that your voice of the customer should use the complaint data, the employee input, and your operations data in terms of transaction failures to identify what are the top 10 causes of complaints and rage. What we have found is that the top customer and employee points of pain are shared. If if it's driving the customer crazy, in many cases it's driving your frontline customer service staff crazy also. So a to do is go ask your frontline reps what three things are frustrating you, and you're going to find that those three things are probably based on frustrations that customers have also. Uh, Now, you also need to assure that marketing is setting reasonable expectations. And again, this gets to the issue of educating customers. What are the limitations? And we had a spaghetti sauce manufacturer a while back where one of the standard complaints was, I have mold in the spaghetti sauce. Oh, uh, have you been keeping it in your refrigerator? Yeah. How long has it been there since you opened it? Oh, about 2 weeks. Oh, okay. You can only keep it in your refrigerator after opening for 6 days because we don't have any preservatives. The minute that we put on the top of the cap, may be refrigerated for 6 days or 7 days, whichever it was, the number of those complaints went down dramatically. So note the limitations, and what we find is that customers will actually read simple stuff like that. Flag the three most prevalent problems and educate the customer, and use multiple channels. I know that we have some internet companies and cable companies on today, and they have the installer, they have a welcome letter, they have videos, they have welcome calls. What we find is multiple channels are really effective in educating the customer. And when you educate the customer on the basic two or three or four potential unpleasant surprises, ratings of the product go up double digits because people don't have those problems. People will play by the rules if they're told what the rules are. And this is where you ask the customer, are you a gamer? Are you a streamer? Are you running a home business? Because then I can educate you about what's important for you. And then finally, have just-in-time communication where if an issue arises during an electronic or digital transaction, you can have a pop-up that says, "Can we help?" And a very good example of how a simple change in your system can have dramatic impacts. There was one insurance company that was getting tens of thousands of calls on how do I print my invoice? And at a meeting, IT said, "Oh, well, there's a link. You just click these 4 clicks in, and here's the link, and you print your invoice." Stop. Let's move that link from 4 clicks in to the home page, and they had the top 4 or 5 requests on the home page, and the number of calls went down by 90,000. So very minor digital changes can have a dramatic impact. Of okay, in terms of making the voice of the customer work well, uh, what we find is that you need to have a sufficient number of observations, and my rule of thumb is you need to have at least 20. Uh, I'm an engineer. What we find is that if it's less than that, well, it's a few crazy customers. But once you have more than 20 occurrences, people start paying attention, especially if you, in addition to having complaint data, also have operations data, plus the employees are saying that it's a time sink. Then all of a sudden people pay attention. And if you're allied with quality or continuous improvement, they will help you gather the data and create the business case, which is the next thing. And compelling stories will also help you make the case. And if you're making a case to a finance person, my suggestion is you ask them about the last time they got upset with their phone company or with their auto dealer, and almost everyone has a story they will share. And then you say, and by the way, our customers behave and feel the same way as you. And at that point, finance is now your friend. And then finally, rather than just saying we have a problem, you have a visible path to mitigation or resolution. What we did at Toyota was whenever we were doing the voice of the customer analysis, we would have somebody from the affected function join the analysis who knew where the bodies were buried, and they would help us in developing a reasonable approach to fixing that particular granular problem. And what one then does, if one prevents the problems, going back to our economic model from earlier, remember we had 200,000 customers who had problems and we were leaving $43 million on the table. Now, let's say that we did customer education and we educate customers so that we now have only 150,000 customers with problems. We now have only 108,000 silent customers being lost. Our customer service unit is still making the 37%, but we're saving $10 million in revenue by preventing problems from ever happening. And so if we spend $500,000 on customer education, we get an ROI of 650%, which means Investing money in voice of the customer and prevention gives you 17 times the ROI of investing money in frontline customer service. So my point here is, and I have a LinkedIn post on this also, that investing in voice of the customer and prevention has a dramatically greater impact, and every contact center should be investing in that. And with that, let me just go to the final, which is here is a evaluation chart. What I've done here is summarized the 12 broad recommendations, three each for access, response, escalation, and prevention. And you should grade yourself on 1 to 5. And if you have more than 45 points out of a possible 60, that means you're at a 3.5 to a 4, and congratulations. What we find in most organizations is that the average rating is probably half that. So what you should do is evaluate yourself on these 12 areas and then pick a couple of battles. Don't try and fix everything. If you can get one or two easy victories and quantify the payoff of that, that then allows you to start moving on to other things. So what I've done is I've really made a transition from just rage into how does one have a strategy to enhance the overall customer experience. But rage is really just done, rage occurs when you aren't doing the basics well. And these are the basics that one should be doing. And by the way, we have articles on the customer rage study and on customer education and delight. And we also have specific data. I showed the word of mouth data on financial services. We have that similar data for a dozen other industries. So feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be happy to send you that data. So in any case, rage stems from predictable glitches in your processes. You should aggressively solicit and incentivize customer input. We can only solve problems we know about. Empower the front line and self-service process in a similar manner using flexible solution spaces, explanations, and empathy. Encourage escalation. It's better to escalate. You're going to get a huge ROI on escalation compared to abandonment, and capture the reason for escalation. Then prevent the problems via proactive education. And then finally, measure your progress on specific issues and report back to the customers and the employees. And you get a couple of measurable victories, and then you're in a position to continue this on a broader scale. So hopefully I have stimulated your thinking. As I said, the people who've asked questions will get a copy of Customer Experience 3.0, the second edition. And we, I believe, have enough time for one question, maybe, or two questions, or complaints. Courtney?
Yeah, I don't see anything. Anyone?
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions? If not, my email you see here, Jay Goodman at Customer Care MC, and my associate, the head of research, is David. And we would love to hear from you with questions about your particular industry. We have data on every industry under the sun, B2C and B2B. Please feel free to reach out to us.
Thank
And
you
if you
so
need to
much.
do a benediction now.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.